Let me go.
Okay, we're live.
Awesome. I'm just, it's been so long. How do I start the freaking?
I think it's
How do I
F5.
start my slideshow? F5. Let's see. Oh, that's not it. There we go. There we go. Okay. Today I'm going to talk about loops. And with this, I mean, we're talking about pretty much all the loops, the while loops, and, you know, functions with loops and all that fun stuff in it. So I'm just going to start talking about loops. We have for loops, while loops, do while loops. And the for loop, you have an initializer, usually a variable set to a number, which increments through the loop, and then an exit condition that says, you know, when the loop should stop looping. And the final expression that runs each time the loop completes a full iteration. So once it goes through, it will spit out the number it's supposed to, and then it'll run back through the loop, and then it'll keep doing that until it says to stop. The while loop, the initializer is set before the loop, and the final expression is included inside the loop, and then the exit condition is included inside the parentheses, and it continues if the exit has not been reached yet. And then once that's reached, it'll jump out of the loop. The do while always runs once before the check is made to see if it should be executed again. So what I've found out is basically with the loops, it's personal preference. Here's the for loops. So if you're going to be writing code and say you wanted to list some numbers, be it 1 through 6, be it, you know, your 2, 4, 6, 8, instead of writing a paragraph for each one, or, you know, making this division for each one, you want to throw it in a loop. So here's your loop. You got your for statement, and these are your conditions you set. You set the variable I, which you would call up top here, set it equal to 0, and then you're going to run it until it's less than or equal to 6. All these same numbers, and then each time it's going to add one more number to I. That's the plus plus. And then for the output, it's going to do your text plus. So your number is, and then I. So first time it's going to be 1, and then it's going to jump back up. It's going to run through it again, 2, and so forth, all the way down to 6. It reaches that. It's going to run through it again. It's going to say, oh, you're 7 this time, so that is not less than or equal to 6. So it's going to jump out of the loop, and then you're done. Your output's going to be 1 through 6 right there. So all the while, you have your while loops. Just set up a little different. You have your variable text equals, then you just leave it open because that's going to change. And then I is set to 0, while I is less than or equal to 6. Run your text, you know, the number is this. Whatever, you can put whatever you want in here. Then plus I, which will be your 1 through 6. And then the do while, I mean, as you can see, it's just set up just a little bit different. You have your variable text equals, that's open. Start I equals 0. You're going to do this. You're going to do these written out while I is less than or equal to 6. So it's going to do this stuff until this no longer is true, and then it's going to jump out of the loop. So your results, once you do that, it's going to say the number is, and then you're going to have 1 through 6, or whatever you want to put as your text. That's what it's going to be, and then it's going to give you those iterations until it's done. Okay, conditions. The conditional statements. I think I want to jump out and run loop for you. That's an if. For, okay, so here's a for. This is one I ran that I made for my son. I'm writing down all of his opponents for his wrestling season. And so I just did a little for loop to run through this array, which I'll talk about in a little bit. But I just wanted to run it real quick and show you how this for loop is going to run through this array, and each iteration it's going to spit out, the name of the wrestler he wrestled. So let me run this real quick. So this is what it does. 2017-18 wrestling opponents. Following is a list of Parker's wrestling opponents during his freshman year in high school. And then it just runs through that array and it makes a list of all of those opponents. And I'll come back to this one later when I talk about arrays. Jump back in here. Let's talk about conditions. Conditional statements represent decision-making in JavaScript from the choices that must be made to the resulting outcome of those choices. So as we see here, the if is a conditional, starts the conditional statement. So we have if, it's hot, this is a program I wrote 3 semesters ago. I mean, it applies to right now, so I'm going to use it. And you're going to wear different shoes, snow, boots, else, if there's something outside of our set parameters, we're just going to say you should probably wear shoes. So I actually have a, going to show that code real quick. So up here, let's say it's rain. I'm going to click my button. It's going to say you should wear galoshes, your rain boots. Is it hot? You should wear sandals. Let's put one that's not in our set parameters. You should probably wear shoes if it's cold outside. Okay, let's jump back over here. Okay, what's your major malfunction? Great quote from Full Metal Jacket by Gunnery Sergeant Hartman. So the functions are fun to run. Function is a code snippet that can be called by other code or by itself, or a variable that refers to the function. Okay, so let's start with variables. Variable, you have a declaration variable, registers variable in the corresponding scope. The initialization allocates memory for the variable, and then the assignment, which assigns it to specified value. You have your parameters. You have your XYZ parameters. They can be whatever you set them to. And this function, my function, you have XYZ. If Y is undefined 0, return X times Y. And then that's just a simple function to run. So on this function footwear that I just showed you, so I get the user input.
I have something for you for babysitting.
Then I have this text, get element by ID, the value, then the message, and then it chooses a message. It goes through and it's going to choose the message based on the user input. And then right here, you put your conditions here. That's your if else statement. And then it's going to spit out, which shoes you should wear. So you have and then your shoe div. This is the shoe div tells this where it's going to go, and it's going to spit out that HTML. So you should wear, and then your message. So just to go back and look at that code again. So you have your function here, your variables, and then you have your conditional statements right here. And then it's going to come down here to the shoe div, and it's going to put the information into that shoe div, and then it's going to come here. This is going to call that shoe div, and it's going to spit out that information on which type of shoes you should wear. Arrays. So arrays are extremely fun and at the same time can be kind of confusing. So it's a special variable which can hold more than one value at a time. You have arrays. Now there's some confusion on associative arrays. You know, are they still arrays or are they not? Many programming languages and arrays with named indexes are called associative arrays. JavaScript specifically support arrays with named indexes, and I'll talk about that in a second. And JavaScript arrays always use numbered indexes. So more on associative arrays. It's debatable whether or not an associative array is still an array in JavaScript, because when the values are assigned to a key in a variable of a type array, it forms into an object. So it's kind of debatable whether or not if it's still an array or is it an object. And it loses the attributes of methods of the array. Attribute has no effect since it's no longer an array type. So it's kind of questionable whether, you know, once you change it into an object, whether or not it's, you know, still considered an array. So we'll just leave it at that. And here's an example of the association. So we're taking this index of the array, and we're going to set it to a name, an object. So we're going to set it to John Doe, and he's 46. And then it's going to, you know, if you ask for the person 0, it's going to return John. And if you ask for the length, it's going to return 3. Person length will return 3 because it has 3 indexes in there. So I don't know. It changed to an object, so it's debatable. And then here's an example of an array running through a for loop, and then it's going to just spit out these objects actually, which are the names of fruits, and then it's going to put them into a list. It's going to spit it into demo. It puts the information in a demo, and then it puts that information up here into your HTML. So that code was that same one that I had for my boy that I'm still working on. I eventually want to put the match score on these, and I'll have to figure out how to do that. But this is that array right here. How to put all of the opponents' names, and then you can add to the array, and you can take out of the array through different code. But this is just the basic array and how you spit it out into your HTML on your web page. So I hope that wasn't too confusing, and that's the end of my presentation. Now I need to figure out how to stop sharing my screen.
Well, it looks like you did stop sharing it.
Oh, did I? Okay.
No, it was great.
So do you stop recording?
I haven't yet. We can keep going, or I can stop recording, whatever.
No, I mean, if you stop it, does it like stay on the same thing, or do you have to make 2 different videos, or what happens?
I would have to make another video if we want to record again afterwards.
Yeah, we should probably just keep it recording until we're done, and then when we turn it in, we can tell them where to watch from.
Yeah, in the video description, I can put timestamps. That way, if the teacher wants, he can just click the link and go straight to the video, to the presentation.
Okay.
I think I can probably edit it in YouTube too. I'm not sure. Haven't played with that too much.
How long was my presentation?
It's a great question. I'm not sure. I don't have any counter or anything here. I'll when I stop broadcasting, it'll show.
Marco, are you ready? Or
Sorry, you were cutting off, or maybe it was me. I'm not sure.
I'm here. Did we lose him?
I'm here. Somebody's cutting off. I
Oh.
keep going on and off. So
Mm.
Maybe it's our connection or something. I found
okay.
it.
So what were you looking to see how long his was? I'm not sure.
He can't tell until he's done recording. I don't think it was very long at all, but that's all right.
Probably 5 minutes.
Yeah.
All right. I guess it's my turn.
All right.
I'm not so sure, but whatever, right?
Yeah, just go for it, man. It's the first one.
Well, like I said, I'm still kind of confused on what he wanted. So let's see. How do you start your slideshow? Yeah, there you go. Oh, wrong screen. Okay, so I had JavaScript objects, functions. I guess object creation functions, meaning functions that create an object is what I took it as. And then inheritance, properties, methods, and instantiation. So first we got to declare as of what was it, ES5 or Java, the committee that decides on JavaScript. They didn't support classes in JavaScript, but I did find out today that the 6th version, they're trying to create some sort of class scenario so that it was more familiar and along the lines with some other languages. But in Java, everything is an object, every function, and they vary little, but they are different. But everything is considered an object. Even arrays are considered an object. So when it comes to inheritance, objects inherit from objects and not classes, and that's where we get the classical language aspect. An object in JavaScript is a data type that is composed of a collection of names, keys, and values represented in name-value pairs. These pairs can contain any data type, including strings, numbers, booleans, methods, which again are really functions contained in an object being an object. So to create objects, there's really 2 ways. The literal object, which uses curly braces, and then the object constructor, which uses the new keyword. An empty literal objects look like this with the braces, so that's null, and null really means nothing. It's my understanding is that if you do null, it's really not even necessary to put it into your code, because it really should mean something. And then literal objects are a shorter way to define the objects and arrays in JavaScript. So to create an empty object, again, use the empty braces or curly brackets, sorry, instead of the normal way where you create a variable O, in this case, equals new object that can have an argument. For arrays, as Bryce was saying, that you can do the variable and then use the brackets, the square brackets, instead of the new array, which is how they used to do it, I guess, before they decided to just start using the, whoops, it went backward, the brackets. So you can skip again the class-like stuff because we don't have it, and then we create an instant of an object immediately, and then the same functionality is described in the previous examples, but using object literal syntax in this way. So var apple equals squiggly brace type, and in this example it's Macintosh. So as we were saying, this is the name pair method that I was talking about right here in that previous slide. So, and then an object has properties. So color is red, and then we get the info. We're pulling it from that function, and we're returning the color that the property that we're calling out, as in this type, and we're using that keyword this. Literal objects get initialized by, again, curly brackets. The constructor initialized by calling a new object. An empty object constructor, so this is now constructor, it's not the literal, is defined like this. So constructor, object constructor equals new object, whatever you're going to name that with its arguments. And this is a little bit of an example down below. Constructor function for person objects. The function is person, and so it has properties first name, last name, age, I, and then we define them using the this. That's how we're going to call them, each one of those properties. And so we create a new object, which is my father, equals this new person, which we're pulling from this one. So we're inheriting from this function up above, and we define John Doe 50 blue. And so when we display it, we get the element by ID demo. It looks like I put that in the wrong order. Enter HTML. My father is my father's age. So we're going to pull the age from up above from that function. Using a function, object.create is probably one of the most common ways to create an object. You define normal JavaScript function and then create an object by using the new keyword to define to define properties and methods for an object created using the function. Use this keyword, which we talked about before, as in this example. So function apple, the type, and then this dot type equals type. So whatever we're trying to declare as a I guess a characteristic or a property of that function apple, and then we call it again. So then to instantiate an object using the app constructor function, we set some properties and call the methods to do the following. So we're saying variable apple equals new apple, which is now Macintosh, right? Apple.color equals reddish. So we're saying, hey, this is what we're trying to get. We're making it pull that property, and then the method is the alert. We're saying get this info and display it or alert or whatever we're going to do with it. So the literal object gets initialized by the, did I go backwards? Yes, I did, sorry. So methods defined internally. An easy way to remember how to use a method is to think of it as a verb, or the action that makes it do whatever it's going to do. In the example previous, we saw the method getInfo of the Apple class and define it in a separate function, getAppleInfo. While this works, it has one drawback. You may end up defining a lot of these functions, and they're all in the global namespace. This means that you may have naming conflicts if you try and use the same library or other libraries with anything close to that name, or I should say the same name, then you'll have those conflicts. So the way to prevent this in the global namespace is you define the methods within the constructor function like this. So you name it here so that you're not using it in the global side. Using this syntax changes nothing in the way we instantiate an object, and it uses the properties and methods. So this is a list of some of the methods that are available to use in JavaScript. There's so many more. There's so many different ones. It's amazing. I didn't even realize there was that many available. But so here on the left, I gave some examples of how they are used, and then on the right, I gave some examples of the name and then basically the definition of them. And then this is the link to where I got them from. So methods added to a prototype inheritance. A drawback of this of the method getInfo is recreated every time you create a new object. And sometimes that may be what you want, but really it shouldn't be. It's rare in this case. More inexpensive way to add getInfo to the prototype of construction function is to call it out after and then call the function using it. Again, you can use new objects exactly the same way in all the other examples. In this case, you don't need to and cannot create an instance of a class that already exists. So you simply start using this instance, apple color equals reddish, alert getInfo. Such an object is also sometimes called a singleton. In classical languages such as Java, singleton means that you can have one of the single instances of this class at any time. You cannot create more objects of the same class. In JavaScript, no classes, remember they don't exist. This concept makes no sense anymore since all objects are singletons to begin with, right? So that's one thing I found is kind of a conflicting thing. So no matter what, the objects are considered single. They're not multiple. They're not singletons. So the third way to present in a combination of other two, you already saw. You can use a function to define a singleton object, and here's the syntax for that. So you see that it's very similar to what we've talked about, but the way we use object is apple.color equals reddish, alert getInfo. The new function does two things at the same time. It defines a function, a non-constructor function, and invoke it with new. It might look like a bit confusing, and I'm not used to it, so that's why it all looks confusing to me. But really want a constructor function that you use only once, and then there's no sense giving a name. So if you're only planning to use it one time, put it in constructor. If you're going to use it in global namespace, put it out there so they can be referenced from everywhere else, right? So then accessing object properties. There's two ways to access the properties: the dot notation and then the bracket notation, which is what we talked about before, the array and then the dot, this dot whatever. So in this one we have a constructor called cowboy. His name, the name property is hoss. The job property is rustler. Weapon is 6-shooter. Greet would be the function. So return, hi, my name is whatever, and you change that to whatever you're going to call, right? So if we retrieve the property value of weapon, we can do so with an object dot notation by typing the variable name of the object. So in this case, cowboy dot weapon is what we're trying to call using that dot property. And then so the output should be 6-shooter. Both dot notation and bracket notation are used regularly. Dot notation is faster and more readable, but has more limitations. Bracket notation allows access to property names stored in a variable and must be used in the object's property contains any sort of special character. So in order to retrieve the object method, you will call it much in the same way you'd call a regular function, just attached to the object variable. So just like you see here, cowboy.greet, that's what we're going to call the method. So inheritance. And I'm not so sure I totally understand inheritance by the way they explain it. So as we said, every object in JavaScript has an internal property called prototype. Prototype is a method that you can call that directly inherits from a parent to a child function or object. So when you attempt to access a property or method of an object, Java first searches the object itself, and if it's not found, it'll search the object's prototype. And after checking both those and still no match is found, Java will check the prototype of the linked object, meaning the inherited object, and continue searching until it finds the end of the chain. They call it a prototype chain because in JavaScript you can go on and on and on, and it just continue on for as long as you want, inheriting properties from above as you go. So objects can be extended in that chain and will inherit the properties and methods of their constructor. Additional objects will inherit everything throughout the chain. So you can call basically from the bottom to the top, and inherit any of those methods or properties. Let's see. So I haven't finished my code to make it what I wanted it to be, but hopefully I'll finish that, tonight after this recording. So basically this is the simple code. I just created a function that's called the parent class. This dot parent property 1 is hello, and then this dot parent method 1 is the parent method 1 with arguments. So I could return that argument. So basically going down, I built another function with a child class, much in the same way as the top one. And and so here I'm trying to force I'm making the child class inherit the properties of the parent. And then I try and alert out to say, hey, yes, it's inherited that and accepted those or not. And basically just a double verification. So hopefully I'll get that finished the way I want it to be, and we can go from there. And I think that's the end of my presentation. So
cool. Thanks, Marco.
Good job.
No!